Hi, welcome back and thank you so much for joining us on Patreon. It's great to see you all coming together. It's certainly the biggest class we've ever had. Remember last week I gave a bit of an introduction to syntropy up in the food forest. So now we are coming down here into the market garden and I'm going to show you the different tools we use here, different plants we use together, different approaches, experimenting and also producing food with the approaches that have worked for us so far. Now, today the topic is grasses. What's the function of the grass? Grasses in general, especially these tropical grasses like kikuyu, are super efficient in the photosynthesis. They're building soil organic matter faster than trees do. Yeah, I know, it's surprising. But they're good at that. And when you remember what I said last week about using all the sunlight coming in and have it transformed into sugar, that's what a dense grass sward like this kikuyu does. No sunlight getting through onto the soil to speak of. Kikuyu, being very efficient turning that sunlight into sugar, can feed a lot of microbes in the soils, mostly mycorrhiza, or fungi, and also free-living bacteria that fix nitrogen. The only problem with kikuyu is once it's in your beds or in your forest garden, it's a bad companion for some plants, especially trees, and it is hard to manage. As soon as kikuyu goes rank, it loses its vigor and doesn't produce as much biomass as if you would mow it constantly. When you start a food forest system, you need to find the right grass for you for the first years, because you want these grasses to produce all this biomass for you in situ, because it also feeds the microbes underneath the soil very effectively. So this is one of our annual beds in our market garden, and it was just recently broad forked. But even with broad forking, what we do is we disturb the soil enough to destroy a great part of the fungal network, the mycorrhiza that was here from plants before. And because there's no green plant here that brings sugar into the soil, the microbes, in which case it's bacteria that are left here, they need energy and they will turn on your organic matter in the soil, the crop residues in the compost that you put in, and eat that up. That brings down the soil organic matter or the humus content, because they need to eat that in the absence of living plants here. To compensate for that, for the annual beds, we use also a barrier of grasses that are perennial, cocksfoot, and they will very quickly put their roots back here faster than our crop will do, and they're very good at mycorrhizal networking, so they quickly inoculate the soil with these fungal strands, and they bring in the sugar from the leaves into the root tips, feeding the bacteria in here so they don't keep on eating the humus. So grasses are soil builders because they're so good at sugar production, and they will also provide us with cuttings that we use as mulch. So we build the soil on the top with mulch, and we build the soil below the surface with these sugars feeding bacteria, making humus. That's how we make soil. And grasses, you choose from a big toolbox what is the most appropriate grass for your situation, and finding the right grass or the right grasses, I think, is one of the most important first step for your food forest. So this is our cocksfoot. We cut it once a month throughout the year. It does the same growth in winter. We cut it always before it flowers. It makes a fantastic mulch. And grasses produce a lot of silica that becomes bioavailable and keeps plants healthy that cannot utilize silica from the soil as much as grasses do. Grasses are highly mycorrhizal, so they have a strong fungal network, produce heaps of biomass, so we get a lot of mulch cover from it. And they make a good ground cover, a hardy ground cover. They make good forage if you want to take it to some animals and then bring the manure back. And they have a very dense, hairy root system which opens up the soil better than other plants can do. It's called a fibrous root system. And throughout that deep, dense root system, grasses inject sugar into the soil, feeding their fungi, feeding free-living fungi, and feeding these free-living bacteria such as Acetobacter, which are also good nitrogen fixers. So all of that we get from grasses. They should always be part of your system, at least in the first so many years. This grass here is a tropical grass, but can handle freezing temperatures very well. Vertical grass is used as an erosion control because it makes a massive root system, and being a sedge, it makes a nice sort of rake that keeps the debris from flowing down the hill. So we use it up in the steep subtropical area as an erosion control, as a border for our terraces and swales and so on. Down here in the floodplains, we use it to prevent damage by the stream flooding and coming in here, pushing into our garden beds. It stops the water flow and just let it go through gently, and the water will deposit all the silt and debris that it is carrying. So we can actually harvest soil with lines of vertebra grass that we use like that. Here it is next to a syntropy bed, and what all these grasses that we use also do for us, because we can cut them so often, every time we cut them, they give us this regrowth hormonal impulse that radiates and gets shared by the mycorrhizal, the fungal networks with all these other plants in its vicinity, and rejuvenates, invigorates, and encourages all these other plants to do another burst of growth. It's sort of like creating a second and a third spring every year. That's what we are after, this pulsing. Yeah, and then another good grass for us here in more protected frosty areas or on our subtropic area. Look how beautiful that elephant grass is. It's now about a year old. We've cut it back once already in spring, and that's how it came back over summer. And we have that here as a companion for an avocado tree that we planted last year, and that is doing really nice in there. No sign of being afraid of shade. We have a hedge of bamboo here as well, which we wouldn't put this in a food forest, but as a boundary it's fantastic, as a windbreak of course. This is the old Hamii variety, but you see it is kept short, and we cut it back every year once in winter and chip it and mulch it, and then it makes a really nice companion. You can see the apple trees here around it are healthy and thriving because the bamboo is pruned, and then it makes a really good close companion. The sorghum Sudan grass setting seed now. It's the second year. We didn't expect it to come back after winter. In this instance here, we planted potatoes in to go along with the Sudan grass. They were incredibly healthy. They have died back now, but it seems like a very promising combination. So as a startup of a food forest, that would be already a good building block. And what we get out of the Sudan grass is all the mulch we need here, so we don't need to bring anything in from somewhere else. But more importantly, it activates your soil. It really gets your soil going with all this root system and all the sugar that the sorghum brings into here very fast, very efficiently, and it's easy to manage. We have a tropical grass called Job's tear, which does tolerate a lot of shade, but it needs also lots of water, and it doesn't do very well with frost. It can survive here on our frosty flats in our temperate zone here, but it's not the ideal candidate because of that. But it was an experiment that turned out better than we expected. In subtropical settings, as an understory, it's fantastic. So we have covered all these different grasses that you might want to use when you set up your food forest. They will stay with you for a while. You might also have inherited some grasses. Any site that gets exposed to a lot of sunlight will have grasses. As we set up our food forest, we want to change them into grasses that can handle more shade, because you see it's a sunny, hot day still, and it's beautifully moist and cool here. In fact, why I'm actually wearing a hat. It is very pleasant in here. But we use these grasses as a stepping stone to get to our food forest, because they are fast tracking us. So we covered kikuyu. If you're in a colder climate, you might have couch instead. How do we get rid of them? We will go into that later, but we also looked at borders and soil covers in a more shady environment like cocksfoot and Job's tear. We looked into more sun-loving, high biomass producers like sugarcane, elephant grass and bamboo. And the art of food forest gardening is to understand which of those to tolerate in the system, up to when, what to replace them with, and at what time we terminate them. So yeah, keep in mind, whenever you start a food forest, think of what tools you use from the grass family. You want annual grasses. If you start in spring, you want corn, Sudan grass as your startup. If you start in autumn, you want whiteouts or even better blackouts. And at the same time, you bring in your perennial grasses like the sugarcane, the elephant grass, whatever is suitable for your situation. And these grasses, they grow fast, they give you quick shelter, and they give you quick biomass production, and most importantly, they quickly cover your soil and feed huge amounts of sugar into their dense root system, making the soil so much better for you in a very fast turnover. So that was our tool selection of grasses that we mainly use. In next videos we show you how to manage them in an efficient way.